Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we are back with another episode of Hearthstone. First things first, let me ask everybody to turn off any ad blockers and help me, and subscribe to my channel, help me make a career. So, last episode we got one victory with Priest and Warlock, and so that's what we're going to focus in here on this episode, and all hopes will be that we get a victory in the next 2 games, and then I can just start doing a round robin, which is what I was planning on doing. I'm just gonna go down the list of all our custom decks and play as every character until we get 7 wins.
Versus Gul'dan.
Or play God games, whichever happens first.
The light shall bring victory.
Nice. Nice. I keep saying I'm saying nice and getting rid of the cards, yeah. Because that's how my mind doesn't work.
I feel icky.
Alright, so I don't know how to say it, and I am reluctant to even go down this
Job's done.
but something I do on the very rarest of occasions happen to catch what's going on with the rest of the world. And one of the things that's going on right about now, so it's probably long blown over and nothing came about from it, was that Phil Robertson of Duck Dynasty has said something yet again controversial, and it has
Job's done.
irritated at least some people, if not a lot of people. It kind of irritated me in a blasé way, because really I don't care what Phil Robinson has to say, and I think it's worthy of mentioning that of the Duck Dynasty episodes I've seen, it doesn't seem like any of his family listens to him either, for good reason, because he does sound like he is a rambling, backwood, uneducated lunatic. Not trying to make a personal attack, that's just how I would classify the things he says. I'm not even saying the manner of his speech. If anything, he kind of sounds pretty articulate, which probably comes from the fact that if he was not a preacher, he certainly is asked to preach more often than most people. And so, trigger warnings for things people might get irritated with, and trigger warnings, I'm going to briefly recap what he said, which is a violent fantasy is all it was called. It was just a completely made up hypothetical story that came out of Phil Robertson's head, not based on any reality at all.
Do you call that a
trigger warnings, it's talking about atheism and atheists and religious people, and so all kinds of trigger warnings. He's talking about killing people, he's talking about raping people.
Stand ready. Job's done.
Am I going to do trigger warnings whenever I talk about these subjects? Probably not. Am I going to talk about these subjects? I don't know. That's what really gets to me, is that here we are having a nice game of Hearthstone. I don't have anything to talk about besides this subject. The subject is of at least a little interest to me, but it's not really going to be in the hugest in line of things that I've done before. So it's all
You to master. My fate is sealed.
just a little weird. So be warned. Send me comments one way or another if you want me to talk about things like this when they come up, and or send me comments if you say just stay out of it and stick to video games.
The light protects me.
But be warned, I'm about to start about. I'm also gonna mention my own personal opinion about the Duggars, the family from 19 Kids and Counting, because there is a very fascinating theological study that needs to go on between those two shows, Duck Dynasty and 19 Kids and Counting, as to how both of them, each one of those groups, deals and presents their religious beliefs. But let's start talking about what Phil Robertson. He was at some kind of Christian breakfast, so a group of Christian people having a breakfast talking about their religion. So as far as that is concerned, he was at least somewhat on topic. That he was at a Christian setting talking to other Christians about what some might argue is a Christian belief. But he's also at a breakfast, and so he tells this story, and I can't quote him directly, but he's like, imagine that there's an atheist man, and he has a little atheist wife, and two little atheist daughters. Now, first sentence, some problems with that already. Why are you calling the wife and the daughters little? Are you saying little as in young? Are you saying little as in small? Why does that matter? It's probably, I'll give that just to the benefit of the doubt that that's just some turn of speech. But the bigger thing that I think a lot of religious people would not see there is, it is not 100% guaranteed, or even hugely likely in a lot of situations, that an entire family would be atheist. There certainly are some families where every single member is atheist, but it's more of an individual decision, way more, 100 billion times more, if I can use hyperbole, that every individual is an atheist, versus families that are Christians or a specific denomination of Protestantism, or definitely not Muslims. Jewish people have a funny situation where even if you're an atheist, they still consider you a Jew, and so you can't ever even really get out of it, because they'll just say you're heritage-wise still a Jew.
You command.
If you just want Jews to stop calling yourself a Jew, it would be really hard. It would be really, really hard to say, I don't want to be called that term at all. It would be really hard to get them to stop. Catholicism, Judaism isn't the only one that does that. Catholicism puts you down as soon as you are baptized at like a couple of weeks of being born. Maybe it's more than a couple of weeks, but you are a baby when they baptize you in Catholicism, and they put you in their records, and you never get out. The only way you can get out of being a Catholic is to be excommunicated, basically, and that does not happen that often. Many Protestants groups have their own lesser-known systems. I wouldn't imagine for a second if a lot of them pad their numbers and play games with all that, but maybe they don't. I can't make a broad generalizations. So, but Muslims, absolutely everybody in your family has to be Muslim, or your family is instructed to completely cut those apostates, is what they're called, out of your life. Otherwise, you risk yourself being severely punished in the current life or in the afterlife, or both, usually both, if anybody in your family. The Bible specifically says to not allow any of your family members to become atheists. That to shun them after a certain time is the instruction. That this is the forgive them 7 times thing, and it's an even longer process if you really follow the process, where you go to them privately a few times and say, come back and be a Christian, be a religion. Then you go and you get a religious leader to go and do it too. And if they still refuse to agree to go back and be religious, then you shun them out of their entire society. And underlying of any shunning is that they will cut you off from any livelihood, which still happens in the United States today. That if one person running a company gets found out by certain groups of people to not be of the exact same or similar enough religious beliefs, then large groups of people will just not give any business to that company. So, not only do companies in the United States have to make a good product and treat their customers well, they also have to pretend to believe a religious belief that really has nothing to do with a business, which aren't entities. And anyone who is religious and says corporations are people is idolizing corporations, and that message amongst religious people needs to be passed along greatly. If you say corporations are people, that humans have the ability to create people through a little bit of paper, that just smacks in the face of everything that the Bible says. Anyways, so let's move on to the next sentence, because that was one sentence and that wasn't too bad. Bad of Phil. Phil's just started. So his next sentence is, the 2 men break into the atheist house, they tie him to a chair, they then rape his 2 daughters, and then they cut off his wife's head, and let's see, let's not go sentence by sentence because it's kind of pointless. They cut off the wife's head, they grab the man's male organ and chop it off. At least the indication is that's what he's saying. He says they hold his member in front of him, so you could be translating it in a different way, but my translation of it was that they cut it off, and then they go to him and say, isn't it great that there's nobody to judge us because you're an atheist, because you don't believe in a God, whichever God? Isn't it great that we can just get away with doing all these things? And he's making the bet that at that moment, if such a fantasy would actually happen, then the atheist man would say, well, I think there actually is something wrong with what you just did, and thus I guess I'm not really an atheist because I actually have some morals, and this a fallacy is always made by a lot of religious people, that all morals come from from a god, so if I have morals and believe in something, I must believe in a god.
The light shall bring victory.
Which is a ridiculous argument. And so Phil's just telling this ridiculously violent, ridiculously unnecessarily violent story to make a very dumb point. A point that can be easily refuted by any atheist. All they have to say is, I have other things that I base my morals on that have nothing to do with a biblical god or any other god. It's just that simple. And a lot of religious people don't want to listen to anything other people have to say. And heck, let's be honest, a lot of religious people don't even want to listen to what other religious people have to say, or anybody else has to say. Religion in itself opens a doorway for a certain type of people, a very small percentage, but a certain type of people that can say, because I believe in God and I feel Him in my heart, everything I think and do is perfectly right. So if you are the type of person who doesn't want to admit that they could possibly be wrong, you can use religion very effectively to not listen to anybody. So he made a dumb point. He made a dumb point in a very dumb way. So one of the things I sent as a personal post to some of my friends was, I rewrote his story as if it was just a swingers meetup, and because all this thing is a fantasy. So what if instead of being a violent fantasy, I just rewrote a few words and made it a more normal sexual fantasy? And so I just took what I was quoted from whatever news source I found it from and changed a few words, like they asked permission to come into his house. They lovingly made loving romantic sex with his over the age of consent daughters. They caressed and kissed about the wife's head.
Let me get that.
And just to kind of show the ridiculousness, if you're gonna make a fantasy, you can make a fantasy for anything. Here's a even better, easier way to express that. What if what if atheist broke into somebody's house and tied the atheist to a chair, and then the atheist broke out of the chair because he was actually Superman and he had superpowers, all because he didn't believe. And that's why atheism gives you superpowers. See what I'm saying about you can make a fantasy about anything. It's not real. It's not realistic. It has no use in a conversation. It's the exact opposite of science, of the observable science and observed science. When you're just making up fantasies, when you're making straw men, which straw men is a concept that everybody needs to be aware of on every side of every argument, where you just say, well, those guys do this, this, and this. And it's the propaganda a lot of times. You know, people in the old wars, they'd say, well, Nazis ate babies and things like that, and people would believe it was true. It just that simply. And it wasn't really verifiable, observable. I doubt any Nazis actually ate babies. Maybe one or two. The German people, there was enough of them. I'm sure even right now in the United States we could probably find a few psychopaths who would eat a baby or have. So, but that's not a realistic thing to say about an entire people. Or even better example, they used to say African Americans, or no, the right term here, they used to say all Africans were not even human. They used to make fraudulent scientific looking papers that said, look here, this proves that they're not even human. That they're just some lower species that don't deserve any rights. So, where are we on this? So that's Phil Robinson. I don't really care what Phil Robinson says. Nobody should. Nobody in their right mind is going to give him any bigger of a pulpit than what he has by being somewhat affiliated with Duck Dynasty, and then he's going to get phased out of it eventually. There's no doubt of that. Just his age alone will get him phased right out of being on the show.
Nox Ramus is on damn stand ready.
But let's see. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I want to do this. Just. So I don't care what he says. Nobody should. What is really important to get to the next conversation is to once again realize that when you watch of the Duck Dynasty episodes I've seen, they all seem to truly love and do their best to support Phil, like a family of good standing normally does. But none of them really give his opinions any higher value than what they deserve, which is to say they don't deserve any, because it's just it's just nonsense that he is
my fate is
spewing. But now I want to talk about the 19 Kids and Counting show, the family, the Ducks, because what I'd really love to see is for a preacher and to do a theological comparison of the Duggars and the Robertsons, because the Duggars, according to what I've looked at, they're the are some Protestant group. I don't remember which one. But this is, let me also say, this is just my opinion, but I suspect. So I'm casting suspicion in mud here without having any evidence whatsoever. But they say they are a part of this Protestant group. I won't even throw out a name because I'll probably be wrong. But it's, to me, when I saw it, looked like just an average one as far as Protestants going, and that they had some miscarriages early on in their life, and they decided to take those miscarriages as a sign that they should not continue down the path of using birth control, and thusly they
Feel my pain.
just naturally from that moment started having lots and lots of kids. But they're I don't know if all 19 are, but 16 or 17 of them are. And so she is gone. She's been having kids long enough that her oldest daughters, 2 of them at least from what I saw, were married and potentially having already had kids of their own, while their youngest kids are still in the realm of being 2 or 3 years old, 4, maybe 5, maybe 6. It's hard to tell. So lots and lots of kids. Just multiplying 9 months by 16, and you've got what, 145 months? That's at least 12 years straight of being pregnant and having kids. I'm sure some of them were twins. That would make more sense. But it's a long, long time to be having kids.
Versus Geralt.
And they say they're this religious belief, and what I'd really like to see is someone from a theological perspective, someone who is fully on board with that perspective, to compare the Robertsons and the Duggars, because the Duggars on their show 19 Kids and Counting never discuss their religious beliefs. They do have crosses in the background, that's true. But I haven't seen as many episodes, so maybe I've only seen 2. Maybe there are some things, but I was watching episodes where one of their daughters was getting married, and they said they were counseling them, and then the cameras were cutting away from that. So there really isn't
Put this apple on your head.
those conversations aren't happening in front of the camera. And that's where it makes me, in a paranoid way, fully admit, maybe it's just a fully paranoid way, wonder what they're really saying, what they really believe. To further put some more mud on this, this is all mudslinging, this is just my opinion. I don't think any of the Robertsons, any of the Duck Dynasty people are homeschooled. Every single one of those kids in my family is homeschooled. And when I see homeschooling from a religious group, red flags. Right there. Because you know you're not getting as unbiased education as you would if you were going to a private school or a public school. That's not fully true. I suppose if you're going to a private Catholic school, you're going to get a very biased education there too, but at least if you were going to a private Catholic school, you'd be around so many other people, there'd be at least some diverseness in the opinions of potentially the teachers, potentially the other students. So when you get homeschooled, it's literally usually just one parent. It's not even both parents. It's usually just one parent who is teaching you everything, and that becomes the final authority to never be questioned, because teachers, public, private, or homeschooled, all of them very consistent in the fact that they do not want to be their authority questioned. They all share that together. So one parent who is also one teacher who is also your parent has just like the final authority for everything. And so they could be teaching close to anything, if not anything. And so that's a red flag. So I've seen 2 separate red flags, and that's about all I can say of 19 Kids and Counting, because I just haven't watched the series enough. I'd like comments if more people have watched them and say, no, watch this episode. They really do get into what they believe and all of that. But I'm not seeing it. Look at the Duck Dynasty. Every single episode ends with them eating around the table and praying. And even as somebody who doesn't even believe what they believe, I appreciate that they are being open about it. I appreciate that they're consistent about it. There's a real believer is way better, in my opinion, than a false believer or somebody who is flippant about it. I would much rather deal with somebody who is a fervent believer than somebody who is a
Squire, attend me.
who's
Ready, sir.
laissez-faire about it. As I've heard as a term, it doesn't make any sense to say you're laissez-faire religiously, hands-off religiously. You're not that interested in the things you believe. Well, you're not very committed to your beliefs, now are you? So let's get back to the mudslinging on the Duggars. My paranoid ears are ringing about the Duggars, and it sounds like to me that they are the beginnings of a cult. A cult of one family, which is more than enough to start a cult. Because I'm betting either the father or the mother, whoever has the real power in there, and I'm sure they both have a lot of power in that
The
situation,
light shall bring
are
victory.
pretty much getting ascended to a cult leader type status. Because and that is, in my paranoid thought, why they don't talk about any of their beliefs is because they know the things that they're saying are there. You always have to be,
I don't have enough mana.
if you're a religious person, you always have to be careful about whether they're telling the truth. If your Sunday service says, now all the kids come over here to this other room and we'll teach them the kids service, I wouldn't agree to that. My own personal opinion, I would not say that. No, they're going to be in the same room and hear the exact same thing I'm hearing, so we can discuss whether we agree with it or not, or what our thoughts on that are about. Because I don't trust it. However, even if the Sunday sermon is like that, a lot of times there is small group sermons before where kids would go learn something in a youth group or a kids class, and parents really aren't paying enough attention to what is being said and who's saying it and who's in charge and how did the church pick or find these people who are saying these things. Lots and lots of questions that don't get asked. There's this whole air, really, just way too large of an air of trust in churches that all somebody has to say is, I believe the same thing as you do, and you'd hand your babies over to them with no real research. You'd let them say whatever they want to say every week for an hour without you in the room. Now you certainly have to give that air of trust whether you want to or not to the public schools if you send your kid to public schools, or the private schools if you send your kid to private schools. There's the air of trust there too, but you should be concerned about all those, really. So I'll leave it at that. That's my mudslinging thought. Is I think that the Duggars are a cult. I think the father or the mother is considered the final authority. I think they are teaching very different things. It is very easy to take a source like the Bible and focus on a few things and defocus on a few other things, and you can twist it to say anything you want it to say. The Bible is a long enough book, collection of books, really. 88 books, I believe, combined together. There's something in there I can guarantee you can use to make any argument you want. And so you gotta be careful about that, and I guess that's just my theory. So even though Phil Robinson is a insane person, in my opinion. Is that actionable? No. I don't think I can. That might be actionable. In my opinion, he might be certifiably insane, but I am not a doctor, so I cannot make that statement or as an assertion. But he sounds like somebody I would classify, and that's not because he believes in his religion. That's because he uses his religion to continue doing and saying crazy things. Which I guess in the previous episode I have talked about that, where truly mentally ill people can be very badly served in a religious environments, because it often can be the case that they can use the religious beliefs of themselves and others to continue their mental illness habits and beliefs. So, the example of that before was I knew someone who was going to a Quaker and Shaker church that would get up and speak in tongues and bounce around and get on the floor and shake up and down and all of that stuff. And he would do that every week, and he was certified. Not, he specifically went to a doctor. The doctor told him he was a schizophrenic. He told me in all earnesty he was schizophrenic, and I'm like, so one of the things that you're struggling with, and he definitely was struggling with, was acting normal, and every Sunday you're going to a church that's allowing you to act very unnormal. And I was like, maybe you should pick a church that doesn't allow for that. Maybe you should have a group of social people, friends, a group of friends in your church community who if they saw you speaking in strange tongues or shaking on the ground would recognize that as you potentially backsliding a little bit in your schizophrenia, instead of encouraging you to do that and do it. Let's say he wasn't schizophrenic. Let's say he was prone to seizures. If you have seizures, should you go to a church that encourages people to get on the ground and bounce up and down and make weird sounds? Absolutely not. Because every time you accidentally had a seizure, nobody would come and help you. They would instead just say that you're doing good and encourage you to have seizures, and all the while you would be having brain damage continue because nobody's helping you. So, yeah.
Job's done.
It's a dangerous thing when mental illness enters it, and that's kind of what I think Phil is. Although, I almost have to make the controversial thing that I think his mental illness comes from a lack of modern education. In the old days, you could just get away with knowing the bare minimal and thinking one way and get away with it. Which is kind of what I think about a lot of old people who still show like signs of racism and stuff. I put it in a class now of just mental illness, that they were so poorly raised as a kid that that's their limited intelligence. In the same way, if you never taught a kid how to speak or feed himself, you would say they're mentally underdeveloped. So maybe it's not an illness, maybe it's an underdevelopment. Maybe I'm misclassifying it. I probably am. I'm not a doctor. But that's where I think Phil really is coming from. He just is used to thinking a certain way, is very uneducated, has lived in the swamp of Louisiana his entire life. And I know people personally from Louisiana, and they had lives very similar to his. But it does, in my opinion, get to a level of illness because people have to be telling him they don't want him to be talking like he does. People have to be telling him to just stop saying these things. They have to be. Just the TV producers, his family. We've even seen instances on the show where they're saying like, yeah, we don't talk about that. Don't talk like that. And I bet there have been bigger conversations there. So when people give you subtle social cues not to talk about certain things, and you're not picking that up, or if people are telling you directly they don't appreciate and don't want you talking about certain things, and you continue it, that's to the level of mental illness in my book. I think so. I have dealt with some developmentally challenged children in my life, and one of the things that they often would do would be start talking about subjects that either were inappropriate or just plain boring, and you would often have to tell them, don't talk about that, and they just didn't get it. I mean, when somebody says don't talk about it, that they don't mean now, they mean ever.
I am master of magics.
I think I might get this, which is good because I'm done with my conversation. Again, let's go back and just say I don't know if I should have talk about these things. I don't know if it really fits in with the video game channel at all. Let me know one way or the other. I don't want to make it look like I'm saying I feel like I need to limit myself, but in a lot of ways I kind of do. And so maybe, as I was just saying, sometimes people don't get the message to not talk about things. Give me the message. Should I talk about these things, or shouldn't? On the religious front, I probably could talk about something religious-wise every recording session because something happens. It happens a lot on the internet of somebody saying something and being ridiculed for it. If you go looking for it, you can pretty much find one for every day of the week. But I don't know if that probably be too much even for my opinion. Alright. Just need to do 5 damage to this guy somehow. I would like to do a double Thaddeus, but let's just win. Let's just win and call this episode. This is gonna be the last game of this episode either way. Let me know in the comments. Let me know what you thought about what Phil said. If I made it seem one way and it was supposed to be taken another. I don't know how. Anybody could have taken it any other way. It just seems like some silly ramblings. But let's see. What do I want to do?
Behold the might of Stormwind!
Well, if I kill this guy that way, And I'll kill that guy that way.
Hit it very hard. To the slaughter!
So he can do 10 damage to me. But he's got to protect himself. Unless he can do another 3. Darn it. Darn it, we were close to a victory. That stinks. Anywho. Let me know how you like this conversation. If you want more, if you want less. I'm willing to go either way. I was barely even wanting to do this, but I figured I'd touch upon it. I can talk about anything. It's not going to embarrass me. It's just, Hearthstone is supposed to be kind of mature, but I'm talking about things. I'm not showing pictures or anything, so I don't feel that I'm violating a E for everyone type mentality on Hearthstone. We didn't get a single victory. That's a shame. Anyways, that's the end of this episode. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment if you want to, and watch every second of my videos. All that helps me out. Let me talk about likes for a second. If you like or dislike this video and do not leave a comment, you are not sending any message to me. I'm fine if you want to like or dislike. That's fine by me. Please do like. But you're not sending a message to me either way about this conversation if you just put a thumbs up or thumbs down. Put a thumbs up, put a thumbs down, put something in the comments that is a well-worded, well-thought-out conversation starter. Or statement. If you don't want a conversation to start, statement. But if you just go thumbs up and you think that said something to me, no. It doesn't, because I may think you're just liking the video because you like my gameplay. I may just think you're disliking my video because you think that's going to have my videos not show up as suggestions anymore. Which I don't think it works that way, but maybe it does. Who knows? It doesn't really bother me one way or another. So don't do that. If you wanna send a message, send a real message. Also, in the comments, if you just say you suck, or something as abrupt and unthought out and unarticulate as that, not really sending a message either, because then I just assume you're a troll and that you're just trolling. So if you say you're awesome, if you say you suck, it's the same thing. You gotta defend some points, have some points. If you could say you're awesome, I want you to talk about this subject more, at least then I have more information. If you say you suck, I don't want you to talk about these things anymore, okay, then I've got some information. But just saying you're great or you're awful is the exact same thing as saying thumbs up, thumbs down. And if you just put a bunch of gibberish in the comments, well, I won't understand it. So anywho, if you want to support me even bigger, I have fan funding enabled, so you can click on my name, Rydo. On the right will be a blue button that says support this channel. Any amount you donate will be greatly appreciated. If you want to follow me on Twitter or Google Plus or Steam or Battle.net so I could play you here, all that information is down below. You could certainly send comments to Twitter, maybe even Google Plus, and I'd see them, but I would highly recommend, if you want me to actually see them, to send them as a comment on the video. That will guarantee I'm looking at that page and will answer quickly. If you send me a Twitter, I may never see it. If you send me a Google Plus, I may never see it. I might, I may not. Let's just stick to comments on the video. Then it will be closest to the video so people know what we're talking about. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Have a good day. I'm looking forward to your feedback.